I just came back from the AI Safety Forum here in Sydney, and I thought I would share some thoughts. One is safety and innovation are not rivals. Trust in your technology actually lets you use it more. And also, distrust is quite good because you don't end up putting all your eggs in one basket and you are more skeptical of the output. So really what we need is investing in keeping the technology very good and safe, and also spreading some bad propaganda about it going badly so that we don't actually trust it too much. But we could, but we don't need to. That'd be very good. Big shift this year compared to a couple of years ago is a focus around the whole package. Previously it was about just how good the model is. Now it's like, it's definitely the model plus the tools. How well can your model actually use the tools? Whereas if it's got good tooling built around it and it knows how to use that efficiently, it is now a whole different kind of thing. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about AI safety. It's very targeted at keeping us safe from the AI, but who is focused on keeping AI safe from us? When thinking about regulatory changes, I realized not all growth is good growth. Oftentimes regulatory intervention is actually like chemotherapy, and we see the same thing in the RBA adjust interest rates, right? Like that does a lot of harm, but it's kind of a necessary evil. And similarly, things that come in place that affect innovation and stifle growth are also, not all growth is good growth, and sometimes we have to accept that. And the price of going fast might be we go fast in some really bad directions, and it's sometimes better to be a bit safer, and sometimes you have to have some very blunt instruments. One thing I thought of was in the regulatory space around primary care clinicians using things like scribes. I think we should standardize some practical measures around confidence in the translation, transcription. I think that addresses some of these problems. There's a lot of problems in this space. What can we actually do? I think having a confidence mechanism in there and mandating that means that if the chatbot or whatever is transcribing is like, did they say they don't have cancer, or they won't have if there's a little, wasn't quite sure what that word is. I think that's a good. And then when whatever analysis is done on top of those notes, then gets access to that, so it can be like, oh, okay, hang on, it was like the person spoke quite quickly there. You can see the timestamps are annotated, and there's a question mark around some of the translations there. So that's a bit of a maybe. Let's not just treat that as gospel. Because I think that's a cause of a lot of problems. So I think that's something that should be thought about, standardizing that if you're going to have any sort of medical application of AI, mandating that it's got features like that seems like a pretty good idea. I get very frustrated around the conversation of, have we got AGI? Or when are we going to get to AGI? Or is this new model conscious? So what? I don't care. By some definitions of AGI, we're already there. By some other definitions, we'll effectively never be there, or not for a very, very long time. And by the time we get there, there's already been so many other issues. So what? Let's talk about what we've got, what is coming down the pipe, where we're headed, the problems that are going to come up with what is here already, and the problems that are going to come up with what's coming in the future. I don't want to get roped into a definition of, well, what is general and what is intelligence? What is conscious? This is a talk for another day. For data centers and what we should be doing in this space, I think this is a particular point of leverage that Australia has. We've got a lot of desert that could have some big solar panels and some data centers sitting out there. We've already got Pine Gap. We could go chuck out a data center out there. I'm sure they'd love that. And in exchange, maybe the government pays the difference of what it would cost to do it out there versus somewhere where it's going to affect people. And we also use this as a point of negotiation to say, hey, like, we want to reserve a certain amount of the capacity of this data center for academic use, for medical use, for domestic use. There's a whole discussion to be had there. Another thing that I have reflected on the last couple of days is the benefits of scale. And I remember looking at some vulnerabilities discovered by a chatbot, and I thought, wow, that would have taken me like a month's worth of work. But actually, it's not quite a month's worth of work, right? Because that chatbot would have been pointed at a particular file and said, look, review this file for vulnerabilities. And if I was given the file, okay, maybe that's more like a day's worth of work. But when you've got, 1,000 files in a repository, then that's a month's worth of work, right? Or 1,000 days. And I think it's also this case of when your model is capable of doing a 5-minute task, you can only break up big problems so much into 5-minute tasks, but you can break things down into like day-long tasks. You can break up much bigger problems into that kind of size. And so as you go from having something that's capable of doing, a 5-minute task, an hour task, a day's task, it's not just, you've got 1,000 of those times now instead of, an hour, it's a day, so it's just 24 times more. It's actually, there's a whole lot more problems that are now able to be broken down in that way, and so it actually scales out a lot further. And so if your model becomes 3 times as good, now there's actually different problems that you can get that to solve, and maybe with another 3 times, 10 times compute, you'll all of a sudden start getting closer to solving things that are significantly larger than you were before. I think that's where a lot of the current big work is being done at a lot of these big companies. And where does that leave us? What are we going to do? I think we will continue to see a concentration of wealth in the people developing the technology. Always want to be the ones selling shovels in a gold rush. And businesses that are able to effectively use that. And I think we will see concentration of power. And we're already seeing that. We've got the world's first trillionaire, which is just a whole separate kettle of fish. And I think, what are the solutions to this? I think we need to seriously look at things like a wealth tax and other ways to start to redistribute wealth. We already needed to be looking at things like this and what that might look like in order to address the wealth inequality crisis that is facing most of the world. And I think AI is going to accelerate that, and we need to be prioritizing solutions in that space. And I think looking at the economist Gabriel Zucman, and his tax. I mean, it seems quite small, 2%, minimum 2% too. So if billionaires are already paying 2% of tax on their wealth each year, then they're fine. It's just if they're not paying that 2%, minimum 2%. We saw Elon Musk last year has grown 40% his net worth. So I think 2% seems pretty reasonable, and I think most billionaires would be growing it at least reasonably above inflation. I don't think that's an outlandish claim, and now that's sitting at sort of 5%. So 2% seems sensible. Minimum 2%. So if they're already paying it, yeah, I think that is landable. Is it sufficient? Probably not, but we've got to start somewhere.